and I'm barely can't wait to get your answers on the various questions. And with that, I would just like directly kick off and raise the first questions, which is, what are the top 5 modern bottles you would pick as an investment?
Yeah, I mean, this is a question that we get asked an awful lot, as you can imagine, and there's lots of different ways in which you can address it. So I think I'll sort of caveat this by saying that these are going to be bottles that say less than £1,500. You know, we offer bespoke advice above, like, you know, that price, you know, to family offices and people with tens of thousands to invest. But these bottles are for, say, like the average person can afford sort of between £300 and £1,500. You know, these are the ones for you. Now, before I sort of mention the bottles, you've got to remember there's a few different ways in which a bottle could grow as an investment. So the most basic level is to look at something that's already in the market and already doing really well, and you're already seeing the returns and investment, and then you jump on that bandwagon. And that's fine as long as you understand the fundamental things that are propping up that value. So, like, why has it jumped from £300 to £1,000? You know, if you don't understand that, then maybe be a bit cautious. You know, don't just follow the herd. Don't just follow the greater fool theory sort of thing. The other side of things with investment is to spot bottles and brands that are undervalued in the market. Now, this is not the fashionable way to do it, because it's going to take longer. I think a lot of people come to alternative investments thinking, I'm going to buy today, and in 6 months I'm going to have tripled my money and it's all good. And, you know, like, brilliant. If you can do that, do it. But it's just like playing roulette. There's no sort of science to that. So we tend to take a bit more of a calculated sort of approach to it. So the first 3 bottles, and these are all the same bottles of the same series, are all from the Glenfarclas distillery. Again, I've covered this on YouTube. You've got the 30-year-old warehouse collection, the new 35-year-old warehouse collection, and the 40-year-old warehouse collection. Now, the 30-year-old RRP is £500 for 30-year-old whiskey. Macallan, that's sort of circa £3,000. The 35-year-old RRP is sort of like £800-900, and then the 40-year-old is sort of circa £1,000, £1,200. Like, you don't really need to be that into whiskey to know that they're very low prices for very high age statements. You know, a Macallan 40-year-old, for instance, is 15-20 grand. These are fundamentally undervalued because, for whatever reason, Glenfarclas isn't fashionable with investors. One of those reasons is the brand. It's family owned, and they don't necessarily push things in a very investment orientated way, like Macallan putting things in the leak, and, you know, like Bowmore teaming up with Aston Martin. You know, they're gearing up to attract a certain demographic. But Glenfarclas, they make solid whiskey, very sherry influenced whiskey, amazing and sort of quite approachable Speyside whiskey. And for some reason, it's never sort of really picked up with the collectors. Now, the thing with these warehouse collection ones that are different is that they're in really nice, beautiful red, you know, warehouse door boxes. It marks a bit of a change away. You know, they are core range bottles, but on each bottle, you'll have a bottling date, you know, etched into the glass. And it's the same with Springbank. You know, Springbank 2 or 3 years ago was, you know, dawdling along, and then all of a sudden collectors gone, wow, this, or investors went, this is amazing. And then you start seeing the prices grow exponentially. That hasn't happened yet with Glenfarclas. So you look at the fundamental things here. They're £500, £800 and £1,200, and they're 30, 35 and 40-year-old whiskey. There is something fundamental beneath that purchase. So I think they're a really, really solid buy. Now, the other 2, you asked for 5, so there's 3. The other 2 are a bit more straightforward. The Macallan 18-year-olds, they're released every year, about £320, and you can build a vertical of them. In 2020, I don't know if anyone watching this remembers, but there was a news story about a boy who was given a bottle of 18-year-old Macallan every year for his birthday, and then he sold it to buy a house, or, you know, he sold it for about 45 grand. We brokered that sale. So it was me and Matthew, you know, it was Matthew's collections, and we brokered that sale for him. And the 18-year-olds, again, it's slightly different than the Glenfarclas in terms of there is historic precedent for their growth, and they grow steadily each year. They're very approachable, sort of £300, £320 a bottle, and do what I'm doing. You know, I've got a 5-year-old son born in 2018. Every year I buy him the new release. So he's got the 18, the 19, the 20, the 21, the 22, and we'll buy him the 23 this year. So when he's 18, he's going to have a beautiful vertical of 18 bottles of Macallan. And you know what? I'm not worried about cashing that out until the end of those 18 years. So the growth in the meantime is by the by. And then sort of like the next one, it's probably the most expensive out of all of these. But it's sort of like a hybrid between the two. So it's from the Lafroig distillery, so arguably more collectible than Glenfarclas, but not as much as Macallan. And it's the Ian Hunter series. They're very similar in design to both the Macallan Archival series, which everybody raves about, and there's a Macallan 80 or Tales of Macallan that they released. Now, the Archival series is a tin with a bottle that sits in a piece of foam in the middle. The Tales of Macallan is a book with all the pages cut out. This Lafroig one fits somewhere between the two. It's leather bound. It's in the shape of a book. You open it up and there's a beautiful space inside the book with pages as well in there. But the key thing with this is it's really old whiskey. So the most recent release is 34-year-old Lafroig for about £1,200. They're doing a 15 bottle series in this, and the age statement is growing each year. So while you may think it's more fashionable to go and buy the folios because they've had a huge increase in value already, these Lafroigs, they're really well presented, high age statements, and quite affordably priced. So you know, I've bought all of those. We're going to release a video on that soon as well if you want a bit more of an in-depth look into those. But yeah, they're my picks, and you don't have to spend a lot of money with those to sort of to get a good collection moving.
Well, really cool. So 3 times Glenfarclas, 1 time Macallan, and 1 time Lafroig.
Exactly.
Okay, very nice. I thought like there would be way more Macallan bottles in there, but that's again me not being as deep into the market as you are. So it's
yeah, and these are ones that are potentially sort of like not as highly rated as others, but they've got, you look at the fundamental aspects of them, all it's going to take is a perception shift in the market and the price goes crazy. You know, it's very easy to sort of see that.
Yeah, I really like the rationale behind the explanation, so it truly makes sense.
Yeah.
Then the next question, you already mentioned the short holding period, and the question goes basically into that direction. So it was like, how long do I need to be invested in whiskey in order to make money?
I think the obvious answer is that if it was quick to make money in the short term, then there'd be a lot more institutional investment in whiskey bottles. The reality of it is that it's a subjective market. You know, prices rise and fall. And historically, people have made huge amounts of money flipping bottles of whiskey. So you buy it on release, you stick it in auction, and you make a load of profit. Now, that was easy to do. You know, you could argue that in a 5-year hold, you could have seen 100, 200, 300% margin on some of these. But that was probably buying between 2015 and 2020. And at that point, we kind of saw a transition in the market going from whiskey being seen as a drink to whiskey being seen as a status symbol. So it started down here in 2015 and ended up here in 2020. Now, what's happened since 2020 is the market, it hasn't stagnated, but the growth has definitely been slower. We've gone through that paradigm shift. We've gone through that transformation. And retail pricing is catching up with the secondary market. So instead of just releasing a bottle at £200 that's then going to sell for £2,000, the retailers are going, and you know, the distilleries are going, well, let's release this at £1,500. You know, the Carazao Geisha series, when you look at those, historically, there was a huge amount of profit left in them. But then if you look at the past, sort of like the Ruby and was it the Sapphire that came before them, they were very exceptionally priced at retail. And you look at the average price since the release, it's averages at pretty much the retail. So look, minimum 5 years. Like if you want to come in for a shorter period of time than that, then that's absolutely fine. But just be aware that markets move down as well as up. You know, look what's happened in the watch market recently. You know, we've had portions of that market dropping considerably. And we've seen the same in the whiskey market. And you come back to that point that I made earlier, the bottles that have suffered the most are the ones that have had the least propping up their value. So they didn't have as many fundamental elements propping their values up. The high age statement, the old and rare bottles, you know, they've always been steady away. You know, it's just this rise of the modern limited editions, and, you know, and are investors to blame for the state of this market? Because a lot of people talk down about investment in whiskey, but even investors are just reacting to products that are being put forward to them by the industry, I would say. So does every bottle need to be a limited edition, even if it's like 2,000 bottles? Of course, no. Does whiskey improve in a big oak presentation case and Lalique or fancy crystal decanters? Of course it doesn't. These are all not tricks, but these are all tools used by marketing people to try and make you buy it. And they're clearly appealing or trying to appeal to the ultra high net worth collectors at the top of the core, the top of the series. And by default, by trying to push the very top end of their market, they lift the value of their lower offerings because it becomes an aspirational brand. So I can't afford their £80,000 release, but I'm on board with these. They're only £600. I'm part of that brand, and you feel part of that inclusion. So it's so with these changes that have happened, with more people coming in, 0 to 5 years is it's possible, but I would say you'd have to be buying very, very cleverly in that respect. But look at it in a medium term. Look at 5 to 10 years. Look at how much the world has changed in the last 5 years. It's phenomenal. So whiskey, I don't think is going anywhere. So let's sort of, define it as sort of like 5 years plus. The longer you leave it, the greater your returns are going to be. So
like mid to long term investment, definitely. And like maybe relating to the first question which we had and the Glenfarclas bottles. So obviously they have like a relative low price. So this is a distillery which doesn't like kind of say, hey, look, I have a 30-year-old whiskey, I can sell that now for $3,000 on the market. So they're really kind of offering a price for people who still appreciate the whiskey and rather not invest into it. And so this is as well why those bottles have a bit the higher potential to develop within as well a shorter time frame, I assume.
Yes, exactly. Because all you're looking here, I think a very good point to understand about the majority of the whiskey market is that when you're looking at collectors and investors, no one gives a crap about the whiskey. The whiskey is irrelevant, and a good way to sort of quantify that is if you look at the Black Bowmore final edition, came out in 1995. £100 a bottle. It's worth £15,000 at auction now. You then take that bottle and then you do what Aston Martin and Bowmore did. So Bowmore took back some of their own whiskey. They rebottled it, this time in association with Aston Martin. So they took back some of that same whiskey from that final edition, rebottled it with Aston Martin. And the last time one of those sold at auction was £115,000. So the same whiskey in two different packages, there's £100,000 difference in price. It's just perception. Look at Diamond Dial Daytonas or something, or look at the Rainbow Dial Daytona. It's fundamentally the movements of the watch are no different than the standard Daytona, but one's several £100,000, one's not. It's not to do with its original function. It's to do with how it's perceived.
If you like this conversation, you can download our app, visit our website splintinvest.com, follow us on social media, or subscribe to our newsletter where you'll be informed about the newest podcast episode. Thank you for this, and until next time.